My parents used my medical emergency to get sympathy for themselves, so I shared the truth online and watched their image shatter overnight. I'm a 25-year-old guy, and if you asked anyone in my family to describe me, they'd probably use one word: sensitive. Not kind, not thoughtful, not creative, just sensitive. It was their polite way of saying too emotional, too soft, too much. Growing up, emotions weren't something you expressed in our house. They were something you buried. My parents cared more about appearances than honesty. My dad was a local business owner, always shaking hands, smiling for pictures, pretending we were the perfect suburban family. My mom played the part too, posting family photos with captions like, "Grateful for my blessings." Meanwhile, I was usually the one behind the camera, trying to look happy even when I wasn't. My older brother, Tyler, was the golden child, varsity athlete, straight-A student, dad's shadow. My younger sister, Emma, was the baby who could do no wrong. Me? I was the one who felt too much. If I cried, my dad called it weakness. If I spoke up, my mom sighed, "Why do you always make things difficult?" So I learned to stay quiet. I learned that peace in our house meant pretending, but silence has a cost. When I started getting sick in my teens, fatigue, dizzy spells, chest pains that made it hard to breathe, no one took it seriously. My mom said it was stress. My dad told me to man up. Even my brother joked that it was probably another emotional episode. So I hid it. I learned to smile through the nausea, to laugh through the pain. Looking back, I realized that's how it always worked in our family. If something threatened the image, we denied it existed. But this time, it wasn't a feeling I could suppress. It was my body breaking down, and soon, no amount of pretending was going to keep that hidden, and that's when everything started to unravel. For years, I lived inside a body that kept whispering, "Something's wrong." I'd wake up feeling exhausted, my hands shaking before breakfast. My stomach burned after every meal, and sometimes I'd black out for a few seconds when I stood too fast. But whenever I mentioned it, my parents brushed me off. "Maybe drink more water," my mom would say while scrolling through her phone. Dad would grunt from across the room. "You're too soft. Toughen up. It's all in your head." That phrase, "in your head," started to echo louder than the pain itself. They took me to a doctor once or twice, but only when it fit their schedule. Every appointment was rushed, every concern minimized. My mom would do most of the talking, describing my symptoms like a minor inconvenience. "He's just stressed from school," she'd tell the doctor with a laugh. "You know how emotional he is." I'd sit there silently, wondering if maybe she was right. Maybe I was imagining it. Over time, I became my own gaslighter. When I felt dizzy, I'd tell myself to stop being dramatic. When my vision blurred, I'd focus harder, pretending it wasn't happening. I forced myself through sports, through classes, through life, because in my family, suffering wasn't real unless someone could see it. The cruelest part? My parents loved showing off their healthy, happy kids. I remember my mom bragging to a neighbor, "We're so lucky. None of our kids ever get sick." I stood right there, smiling weakly, pretending not to feel like I was dying inside. It wasn't until the day I collapsed at school, my body finally refusing to play along, that their perfect picture started to crack. I remember the sound of the floor rushing up, the gasps, the cold tile against my cheek. For the first time, my pain couldn't be ignored, but even then, they found a way to make it about them. When I woke up in the hospital, my throat was raw from the oxygen mask, and my head pounded like I'd been hit by something heavy. A nurse was adjusting an IV drip beside me, her voice calm but serious. "You're lucky you got here when you did," she said. "Your body's been fighting itself for a while." Over the next few days, I went through a blur of tests, blood work, scans, and long, quiet hours staring at white ceilings while machines beeped softly. When the doctor finally sat down with me, his expression said it all before his words did. "You have an autoimmune disorder," he explained, showing me the chart. "Your immune system's been attacking your own tissues. It's likely been progressing for years." I felt hollow. He went on about treatment plans, dietary restrictions, medications, regular monitoring, things that would become a lifelong routine. He said if it had been caught earlier, the damage might have been less severe. That sentence stayed lodged in my chest like a stone. If it had been caught earlier, my parents were sitting behind me. My mom gasped at the word chronic, clutching her pearls like she just heard a tragedy on the news. My dad frowned, more irritated than upset, muttering, "You're sure this isn't just stress?" The doctor gave him a look that shut him up instantly. I waited for guilt. An apology, something, but instead, my mom started talking about how hard this must be for her as a mother. My dad nodded along, saying, "We'll get through this together as a family." It sounded rehearsed, like they were auditioning for sympathy rather than showing concern. That night, lying in my hospital bed, I checked my phone and froze. My mom had posted a long Facebook status. "Our brave son is fighting a rare illness. Please keep us in your prayers during this difficult time." The comments were full of hearts, hugs, and praise for her strength. Not one line mentioned the years they'd ignored me. I should have felt comforted by the support. Instead, I felt used, and that was only the beginning. The hospital became my second home. IV lines, cold meals, fluorescent lights. I got used to them faster than I'd like to admit. The doctors started me on treatment right away, and the medication hit hard. I lost weight, my hair thinned, and my skin went pale. Every mirror felt like a stranger staring back at me. Meanwhile, my parents were thriving, at least online. My mom's Facebook posts became a running series, updates about her son's courage and the emotional toll of parenting a sick child. People flooded her comments with sympathy. She loved it. Every time I opened my phone, I saw her tagged in photos, smiling in the hospital hallway like she was visiting a charity case, not her own son. One afternoon, a nurse came in holding a small basket of flowers. "These are for your mom," she said kindly. "Someone from her prayer group dropped them off." I laughed, bitter and low. Of course they were. The truth was, my parents weren't paying for much. Insurance handled most of it. But they started a GoFundMe anyway, to help cover medical bills and emotional recovery. They didn't even tell me until it was already live. My name, my face, my illness, their profit. When I confronted my mom, she sighed. "Sweetheart, people want to help. Let them." My dad chimed in. "It's not about money, it's about community support." But when I asked where the donations were going, they both went quiet. I started to realize I wasn't a son anymore. I was a story, a way to make them look good, and while they soaked in sympathy, I was slowly fading physically, emotionally, and invisibly. But the worst part was still to come. 2 weeks after I got discharged, I learned my parents were scheduled to speak at a local church event. The flyer said, "Overcoming Adversity, A Family's Journey Through Illness." My name was printed under the title like a prop in their performance. I hadn't even been invited. When I asked my mom about it, she smiled like it was something to be proud of. "Oh, honey, they just wanted to hear our story. It's inspirational." "Our story?" I repeated, stunned. "You mean my diagnosis, my pain?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Don't be so negative. This helps people understand what we've been through, what they had been through." That Sunday, I sat quietly in the audience, my hoodie pulled over my head as my parents took the stage. My mom spoke first, voice trembling at all the right moments. "When our son got sick," she began, "it shattered our world." My dad nodded solemnly beside her, adding, "We prayed every night for strength. It's been so hard watching him struggle, but we stayed strong for him." The crowd was silent, moved. Some even wiped tears. Then came the applause, loud, heartfelt, endless. My mom bowed her head modestly, soaking in every second. Meanwhile, I sat there, stomach twisting. They'd twisted every truth. They talked about catching it early and supporting me through recovery, as if they hadn't ignored me for years. Not once did they mention the GoFundMe, the lies, the way they'd turned my illness into a photo opportunity. When it ended, people lined up to hug them, thanking them for their courage. A few even congratulated me, but all I could do was smile weakly and mumble thanks. That night, I couldn't sleep. Their performance kept replaying in my head, the fake tears, the nods, the applause. I realized they weren't just ignoring my pain anymore. They had stolen it, and for the first time, I started thinking about taking it back. After that church event, it felt like my parents had leveled up in their performance. Everywhere they went, people stopped them to say how inspiring they were. The sympathy, the admiration, it became their oxygen. Meanwhile, I was still trying to make peace with my diagnosis, still processing what it meant to live with something chronic. But at home, it was business as usual. My pain didn't fit their storyline unless it made them look selfless. One night, I finally tried to talk about it with my brother Tyler. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Don't you see how fake it all is?" I asked quietly. "They're acting like they got sick." He didn't even look up. "They're just trying to cope, man. Be grateful." Some parents would have bailed. Grateful? I laughed, bitter. "They used my illness for attention." He shrugged. "So what? Everyone's proud of you. Why ruin it?" That word, ruin, stung. As if truth could ruin anything that was real. My sister Emma wasn't any better. When I confided in her, she rolled her eyes. "You always think mom and dad are against you. It's not that deep. They're just telling your story." "My story?" I snapped. "Then why do they keep cutting me out of it?" She hesitated, then said softly, "Because your version makes them look bad." That silence that followed said more than anything else could. I started collecting screenshots of their posts, Facebook updates, church programs, donation records. I didn't know why yet. Maybe part of me needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that this was really happening. But deep down, I already knew the truth. In our family, image mattered more than integrity, and I was done being their prop. As weeks turned into months, my health started to stabilize. The medications were working, the flare-ups less frequent, and for the first time in years, I felt a faint sense of control over my body. You'd think my parents would have been relieved, but oddly, they grew distant. My mom stopped posting as much about me. The prayer updates slowed down, replaced by her usual posts about home decor and church events. My dad barely asked about my appointments anymore. It was as if my recovery had stolen their spotlight. One evening, I told them I wanted to start sharing my own experience online. "I think it might help other people," I said. Talk about what it's really like." My mom froze mid-bite. "What do you mean your version?" "I mean, my actual experience, not the one you post about." Her face tightened. "Sweetheart, that's not a good idea. You don't want to make us look." She stopped herself. "Look what?" I pushed. My dad sighed loudly. "Don't stir up drama. You've already gotten enough attention." That word again, attention. As if surviving an illness was a show I refused to end. I realized then that my recovery didn't fit their narrative. They didn't want a healthy son. They wanted a storyline. They'd rather I stayed quiet, fragile, and photogenic than strong and outspoken. That night, I scrolled through old posts again. The captions felt like lies carved in digital stone. "So proud of our brave boy," one said under a photo of me asleep in a hospital bed. My mom had written it while sitting next to me, never once holding my hand. My health was improving, but inside, something darker was festering. I wasn't just sick of my illness anymore. I was sick of them, and I didn't know it yet, but the breaking point was already on the calendar. It happened on a random Tuesday. I was scrolling through my phone when a colorful event poster caught my eye, my own face staring back at me. The heading read, "Hope for Healing, a fundraiser gala for autoimmune awareness." My name was printed in bold beneath it, like I was some kind of guest of honor. Only I'd never heard of it before. At first, I thought it had to be a mistake. But then I saw who organized it, my parents. My chest went cold. I walked into the living room, holding my phone out. "What is this?" My mom barely glanced up from her laptop. "Oh, that. Isn't it wonderful? The church partnered with us to raise awareness, and funds, of course." "Funds for what?" I asked sharply. She smiled that PR smile I'd grown to hate. "Your ongoing care, honey. People want to help." I clenched my fists. "You didn't even tell me." "That's my name, my story." My dad cut in, voice firm. "We're doing good here. Don't make this about you." That sentence. That single, brutal sentence. I walked away shaking, every part of me buzzing with disbelief. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they'd taken my pain and repackaged it like a community project. They used old hospital photos, ones I hadn't even consented to. In one, I looked half dead, pale, and hooked to wires. That image was now printed on flyers and social media, paired with captions like, "A family's faith through struggle." I sat in my room that night, surrounded by proof of their lies. The GoFundMe, the Facebook posts, the speeches, the photos, and now the gala. They thought they could own my story forever, but I was finally done playing their supporting role. That night, I made a promise to myself. They told their version. Now I'll tell mine, and this time, the whole world would hear it. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at my laptop screen. My hands were shaking, not from illness this time, but adrenaline. I opened Reddit, the one place where strangers actually listen. I started typing. At first, it was messy, a blur of anger and exhaustion. But as the words came out, so did the years of silence. I titled it, "My Parents Used My Illness for Clout. Here's the Truth." I wrote everything. How they ignored my symptoms. How they faked concern for sympathy. How they used my hospital photos, lied about expenses, and turned my diagnosis into a performance. I uploaded screenshots, texts, posts, fundraiser links, all of it. I even included timestamps showing how the donations went straight to their personal account. Halfway through writing, I paused, tears blurring the screen. A voice in my head whispered, "Don't do this. You'll destroy your family." But another voice, louder this time, said, "They already destroyed you." When I hit post, my heart felt like it might burst out of my chest. I shut my laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the faint hum of my oxygen machine. For the first time, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt like peace. An hour later, I checked back. Hundreds of comments, then thousands. People were angry, shocked, supportive. Strangers shared their own stories of narcissistic parents and manipulation. One comment said, "You didn't expose your family, you exposed their lies." By midnight, my story hit the front page. I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed nonstop. Notifications, messages, interviews, podcast requests. And somewhere in another room, I imagined my parents scrolling through the same post, realizing they no longer controlled the narrative. I didn't know it then, but that post was about to change everything. Again. Because once the internet saw the truth, there was no going back. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was buried under notifications, Reddit, Twitter, even news outlets tagging my story. Overnight, it had exploded across the internet. My inbox was full of interview requests and messages from people saying things like, "You told my story," and "I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did." At first, I didn't believe it. I refreshed the page over and over again, watching the numbers climb. Upvotes in the hundreds of thousands, comments pouring in faster than I could read them. I wasn't invisible anymore. Then came the part I'd been both craving and dreading. The reactions from people who actually knew my parents. Old family friends started commenting beneath my mom's posts, asking questions like, "Wait, didn't insurance cover everything?" Or, "Why didn't you mention that he'd been sick for years?" Her perfect image was cracking in real time. By noon, she deleted half her posts. My dad's business Facebook page turned off comments completely. But screenshots had already spread everywhere. Side-by-side comparisons of their brave parent posts and my receipts showing where the GoFundMe money really went. Someone even created a timeline of the entire situation. I didn't say a word publicly. I didn't have to. The truth was doing all the talking. At one point, a friend from high school texted me, "Your mom's freaking out. She's saying you're exaggerating." I stared at the message for a while before replying, "Then she shouldn't have lied." That night, I scrolled through the thousands of supportive messages. I felt a strange mix of triumph and guilt, like justice and grief tangled together. I'd waited years to be believed. Now the world finally saw what I'd lived through, but part of me knew this wasn't over. My parents wouldn't go down quietly. And I was right. It didn't take long for my parents to respond. That evening, my mom posted a long, tearful video on Facebook titled, "Setting the Record Straight." She sat beside my dad, both of them looking pale and drained. Her voice cracked as she said, "We love our son, but he's confused. He's struggling emotionally, and people online are taking advantage of him." My dad added, "We'd never exploit our child. This is a heartbreaking misunderstanding." They turned themselves into victims, again. But the internet wasn't buying it. Comment sections flooded instantly. People dug up archived versions of their fundraiser pages, cached posts, screenshots I hadn't even uploaded. Someone compared donation timestamps with purchase records of the new living room furniture my parents had bought during my hospital stay. Another found a video of the church event where my dad talked about how they'd paid out of pocket for everything, right next to the GoFundMe link. One thread simply said, "The receipts don't lie. I didn't say a word online. I didn't need to. The evidence was everywhere. For every fake tear they shed, someone dropped a new screenshot, a new contradiction, another piece of proof. Watching it unfold felt surreal, like years of gaslighting collapsing under the weight of truth. Then the news outlets picked it up. Local media ran headlines like, "Family accused of exploiting son's illness for donations." By the next day, my parents were in full damage control mode. They released a carefully worded Facebook post titled, "When Family Turns Against You." It was full of phrases like false accusations, distorted truths, and a son struggling with mental health issues. I sat there, staring at the screen, my jaw tightening. They weren't just denying it, they were trying to paint me as unstable, but the internet wasn't buying it. People had already archived everything, every post, every donation link, every prayer for our son caption. Screenshots spread across platforms faster than they could delete them. Someone even found their GoFundMe history and tracked how most of the money had gone toward home renovations and vacation expenses. The receipts were undeniable. Within hours, their comment sections turned toxic. Former friends, donors, even members of our church started asking where the money went. "Why did your kitchen remodel cost $10,000? One comment read, another said, "You preached about faith but stole from your sick kid." The tide had turned completely. My mom tried responding to one of the comments, typing paragraphs about how people were twisting her words, but it only made things worse. My dad, meanwhile, called me. His voice was low, shaking with rage. "You humiliated us," he hissed. "You've destroyed our reputation." I took a breath. "No, Dad. You did that when you decided your image mattered more than the truth." For a moment, there was silence, then a click. That night, I sat by my window, city lights reflecting off the glass. I should have felt triumphant, but mostly, I felt tired. Years of being silenced, ignored, and dismissed, all boiling down to this strange, viral justice. The world finally saw what I'd been living with all along, but I had no idea how ugly things were about to get behind closed doors. When the dust started settling online, it erupted at home. My phone buzzed nonstop with angry messages from relatives. My aunt texted, "How could you do this to your mother?" My uncle left a voicemail, his voice shaking with disappointment, saying, "Family matters stay private." Even my grandmother, who'd barely spoken to me in years, called to say, "You embarrassed everyone. You should apologize." It was like watching a domino line fall, each one toppling into the next. I became the villain in my own story again. My brother blocked me completely. My sister messaged once, a single text that said, "You could have handled this differently." I stared at her words for a long time before replying, "You mean quietly?" She never answered. At first, the guilt hit me hard. Maybe I had gone too far. Maybe I had ruined them. But then I remembered lying in that hospital bed, alone, unheard, while my mother collected sympathy online like trophies. I remembered my father telling me to man up while I was too weak to stand. And just like that, the guilt turned into clarity. The truth didn't destroy my family. It revealed what was already broken. Still, the silence afterward was brutal. No calls, no messages, no family dinners, just the echo of a door I'd finally slammed shut. I spent those nights in my apartment, rereading the comments on my post, strangers telling me I'd done the right thing, that I was brave. I clung to their words like a lifeline, because the people who were supposed to love me only loved the version of me that made them look good. I'd finally chosen myself. But that choice came with a loneliness I wasn't ready for. And soon I'd hit rock bottom in a way I didn't see coming. The days that followed felt eerily silent. My phone, once overflowing with messages and notifications, now sat dark on my nightstand. The post was still out there, still viral, still being shared. But the initial rush of adrenaline had faded. All that was left was the echo of what I'd lost. I moved out of my parents' house not long after everything blew up. I packed my things quietly, one box at a time. No one came to stop me. My mom didn't say goodbye. My dad didn't even look at me. The last thing I heard him mutter was, "You'll regret this." Maybe he was right, but staying would have killed me slowly. For the first time in years, I lived alone. The quiet was suffocating at first. No shouting, no passive-aggressive remarks, no pretending. Just me and the endless noise in my head. I replayed every moment, the doctor's words, the posts, the fundraiser, the lies. Some nights I wondered if I'd gone too far. Other nights I wondered why it took me so long. Therapy helped, though it was slow. My therapist told me something that stuck. Grief doesn't only come from death, it comes from the loss of illusion. That's exactly what this was. I wasn't mourning my parents. I was mourning the fantasy that they'd ever truly loved me unconditionally. There were nights I'd scroll through Reddit again, reading the comments I'd once found empowering. Now they just reminded me of how broken I felt. Strangers called me brave, but they didn't see the part where I cried into a pile of unpacked boxes, wondering if exposing the truth was worth the loneliness that came after. Rock bottom didn't come with screams or confrontation. It came in silence, the kind that forces you to face yourself. And it was in that silence that something unexpected began to grow. It started with a message from someone I didn't know. "Your story helped me finally speak up about my mom," she wrote. Then another. "Thank you for putting into words what I never could." Slowly, my inbox filled with strangers, people who'd lived through their own versions of my pain. They called me brave, strong, courageous. But every time I read those words, a small part of me flinched, because behind the praise, I still felt broken. I started sharing more, answering questions about chronic illness, writing about what it's like to grow up in a narcissistic family. I never named my parents again, but everyone knew who I was talking about. My posts started gaining traction. I was invited on a small podcast to talk about turning trauma into awareness. The host introduced me as a voice for survivors. I smiled, thanked them, said all the right things. But when the recording ended, I just sat there staring at the microphone. I didn't feel like a voice. I felt like an echo. Then one night, I got a call from an unknown number. My gut told me to ignore it. I didn't. It was my mother. Her voice was steady but sharp. "You need to stop this," she said. "You're embarrassing us." "I'm telling the truth," I replied. She sighed, that long, theatrical sigh she'd mastered. "The truth?" she repeated, almost laughing. "You've always been dramatic. You twist everything." I could hear my dad in the background muttering, "He just wants attention." I didn't argue. I just hung up. That call didn't break me. It confirmed what I'd known all along. They didn't want healing. They wanted control, and without realizing it, their silence had already given me something they never could. Freedom. Months passed. My health was stable, my life calmer, and for once I was starting to feel human again. I'd built a quiet routine, therapy, work, long walks, cooking for myself. The world had finally stopped spinning, and the noise of that whole storm was fading. Then one morning, an email popped up with the subject line, "Please read from Mom." My stomach dropped. Against my better judgment, I opened it. It wasn't an apology, not even close. It was a masterpiece of guilt. She wrote about how the family hasn't been the same since your post, how my dad's business had lost clients, how my sister cried over what you did to Mom. There was a single line that hit me hardest. "You need to fix this. People are starting to talk, not we miss you, not we're sorry, just fix this." I stared at the email for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard. A few months ago, I would have written back, a long, emotional response trying to explain, justify, defend. But this time I didn't owe them anything. Instead, I forwarded it to my therapist with a single line. "Guess they're still in denial." Then I deleted it. That simple act, click, delete, felt like a kind of closure I'd been chasing for years. I realized they didn't reach out because they wanted reconciliation. They reached out because they wanted damage control. I wasn't their son in that email. I was their PR problem, and in that moment, I knew I'd never get the apology I deserved, but maybe I didn't need it anymore. Because healing didn't mean getting answers, it meant walking away without them. It's been a year since everything happened, and I can finally say this without shaking. I don't regret a thing. Not the post. Not the fallout. Not the silence that came after. Because sometimes the truth doesn't need an audience. It just needs air. For so long, I thought healing would come with a grand moment of reconciliation, a hug, an apology, some cinematic closure. But it didn't. Healing came in small moments. Quiet breakfasts alone without walking on eggshells. Doctor visits where I spoke for myself. Nights where I could breathe without guilt. That's what peace looks like now, not loud, just honest. People still message me sometimes, new followers who find the story, thanking me for telling it. I always reply the same way. You're allowed to tell yours too. Because that's what this really was about. Not revenge, not exposure, but reclaiming the voice they spent years trying to silence. I've stopped checking my parents' social media, though friends occasionally mention they've gone dark online. No more prayer updates, no more photo ops. Just quiet. Maybe they've finally realized that sympathy built on lies doesn't last. Sometimes I wonder if they ever sit together and think about what they lost. Not their reputation, but me. The son they taught to stay silent, who finally learned that silence isn't loyalty, it's surrender. I close my laptop, the same one I used to post that story, and take a deep breath. The sunlight hits the room just right, soft, steady, real. If someone tells your story without your consent, I whisper, almost to myself, and take it back. Because the truth doesn't need a PR team. It just needs the courage to be told, and this time the story belongs to me.